Gustavo Morello, as most of you know, is a Jesuit priest and professor of sociology here at BC. He was the principal investigator of a research project that was actually a very big deal called The Transformation of Lived Religion in Urban Latin America, a study of contemporary Latin Americans' experience of the transcendent, which went from 2015 to 2018. He has also delivered the prestigious Darcy Lectures at Campion Hall, which is the Jesuit residence at Oxford University in the United Kingdom. Gustavo studies Latin American religious landscape, exploring how modernity affects people's religious practices. His latest book, published by Oxford, is entitled Religion in Latin America, an Enchanted Modernity. Welcome, Gustavo.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for the invitation. Thank you, all of you, for braving the storm and coming here today. So, in the mood of the instructions I received, I have my notes here, but it's more a conversation. So, just to keep it on time. What is a Jesuit doing exploring tattoos? Why are they paying me to do that? So my interest has to do mostly with religious practices. I do think that there is more religion than we see. And that's the main thing. I think that there is religion, but we are not looking at the correct places, or at the places where religion is. We are keep exploring religion with tools like church attendance. I'm not saying that it's not important, but I'm saying that church attendance has to do with a society that was 1940s, where family had 2 kids, a dog, a car, refrigerator, live in the suburbs, and you were married at 25, 26, and started the process of baptism and the sacraments. So it was a practice that has to do with the society. And as a sociologist, I deal with the human side of religion. If the society changes, if the way in which we live changes, the ways in which we practice religions also changes. So it's thinking about measuring GDP only by union industrial workers. That was great in the 40s. There may be some today, but it's not the economy. So measuring church or measuring religion by church attendance is like that. I'm saying it's not that it's not important, but there are other things going on. So that's the frame where I went into the tattoos. In the project that Mark mentioned, in Latin America, we interviewed 250 persons in Córdoba, Argentina, Montevideo, Uruguay, Lima, Peru, and we asked the people, part of the interview was, bring us something that represent how do you connect with divinity, transcendence, whatsoever. It could be a religious object. We kept it vague enough for Pentecostals to bring something and don't think that we were asking for Catholic stuff, or for non-believers that we were looking for religious thing. It could be a picture, could be an object, it could be a picture of people, whatever they wanted. It was something meaningful that helped you to connect. Without expecting, we got these pictures of tattoos. When we started to sort the pictures, it's like, okay, what are these tattoos about? I mean, why are those things meaningful? Like, what is the point of this? So we went to the interviews, and with the tattoos and the interviews, we found that 21 person of the 250 brought some tattoo as a meaningful object. It's interesting because 10%, this is the thing that we did in Latin America was not a representative survey, but 10% of U.S. Citizens, U.S. residents with tattoos said that 10% of U.S. residents have tattoos that they said is meaningful or religious, which is kind of closer in terms of the number there. So, this is a picture of a tattoo of Santa Muerte in Mexico. Okay, we interviewed this woman, and she has a tattoo on her left arm. We are born without tattoos, so we can ask, paraphrasing. I'm fearful to mention about philosophy here, but Parmenides, the philosopher who said, "Why the being and not nothing?" why tattoos are not nothing. Why do we have tattoos if we don't need tattoos? We are not born with tattoos. Why in this part of the body and not in another part? So I think the point is, if there are tattoos when they could not be there in this part of the body and not in the other one, is because they are saying something. It might be membership to a social group, it might be religious identification, it might be just aesthetics. I like them. But in sociology, even taste is a social construction. Why this style and not another one? So the tattoos, if you look from a sociological lens, are always saying something. That's kind of our point. And the interesting thing is that they are declarations that are not triggered by a question. When a social researcher we go to the field, we ask the field to answer things for us. Tattoos are not triggered for any question. It's a statement that is kind of free in that sense. So I argue that tattoos are pointing to something meaningful. They are a practice of enchantment, or they present us a system of meaning. From a sociological perspective, sacredness is not something that comes with the things. Like in theology, and I know many of you are theologians here, the sacredness is something that is inherent to the thing. It's this bush where God appeared to Moses. For sociologists, no. Why? We don't care about this bush. This bush was built and people do not walk over that, so people build the idea of the sacred. For what reason? Up to the people. But it's the social construction that we take care about. And sacred is something that is separated from the profane. And sacred can be religious or secular. Sacred is something that you are not going to negotiate. Think about human rights. In our society, it's sacred. We are not going to negotiate that. Think about, for us today, gender rights. It's something that we feel, okay, this is something that we stand for. In terms of religion, your dogmatic faith, kind of the same thing. For Peter Berger, a neighbor for a couple of years here who passed away some years ago, he said that the sacred not only opposed to the profane but also to chaos, because the sacred is something that orders our life. When we say, I'm not going to negotiate this, I'm saying this is an important value for me, and I structure my life in that kind of with that kind of value. So the tattoos represent the things that are sacred for someone. Represent the things that people, because of their story, because of their circumstances, experiences, values, there are things that you want to keep from the oblivion of time, that you want to keep beyond the futility of time. Those things that became enchanted, those things that became important, that help you to connect with something beyond, is what constitutes this system of meanings that I think that the tattoos are, for that reason, a practice of enchantment that build a system of meaning. Why the tattoo is sacred? Because of the many things that happen to you, you select one. For example, in the first pictures that we saw, the first one there is the name of the firstborn of the guy. So when he became a father, he got that tattoo. The second one is a signature of the deceased mother of this woman. So after she died, she got that tattoo. She liked flowers. For that reason, she did this kind of vine there. And she got the tattoo on her feet because she said, it's something that I can see every day when I take a shower. So she will be present there. So from all the relationships that these people had, from all the people that those persons met, they decide these are significant people for them. And they invest time. I only have a small tattoo on my forearm that didn't hurt, but I can imagine that the tattoo on your top of your feet will be very painful, so it's an investment of pain, of suffering. Tattoos are always risky. There is no medical protocol for tattoos. There is no approval about there is no process for the ink of tattoo. So if you are an anti-vaccine person and have a tattoo, you are a contradiction walking. There are much more tests about vaccines than ink for the tattoo. So it's a risk. It's an investment of health, or money, of time. In that sense, and also the real estate of the skin. Once you get a tattoo on your shoulder, you have only one more shoulder, and that's it. I mean, there are not many other options. So it's sacralizing things. It's separating something and distinguishing that thing from the rest of the things that you have around. But more interesting, tattoos are, I think, sacralization practice because they are close to religious practices. So, discernment. Tattoos take usually 1 to 2 years to decide the first tattoo. We do have the image of some drunken binge in Vegas and you come back with a tattoo. Most of tattoo artists don't like that. They will reject person that goes intoxicated in the tattoo parlor. I'm not saying that they are not there, but the first tattoo, most of the people think for the tattoo a long time. What to get, from whom, with whom, what kind of drawing. But let's say that you want to honor your firstborn. What are you going to get? Their first drawing, their names, like the whole decision, year and a half. Asceticism. As I mentioned, tattoos are painful. And we do pilgrimage, we fast, we do penance. So there is some kind of ascetic experience with the idea of the tattoo. Commitment. Tattoos are for life, like a preschool or marriage. For life, but not so much. I mean, we can change that. Tattoos kind of the same thing. Are for life, but you can replace it. But the idea is you don't get the tattoo if you are going to change it in 2 years. Like you are expecting you are going to stay with the tattoo. So there's a sense of commitment as much as with religious commitments. And narratives. Tattoos help you to tell your story. Tattoos are devices that people have to tell your stories. Tattoos are always from someone else. Most more intimate tattoos are from someone special, but they are always from someone to see. And people want to control who are going to see the tattoo. So that's a kind of discussion in which part of the body that has to do usually with the work situation of the people. What about religious tattoo? One thing that is fascinating about the US is the amount of surveys that you have about different things that is impossible to get in other countries. We don't know how many tattoo people are in Argentina. We have at least 2 representative surveys from the US, Baylor, Religious Survey, and Pew, and they are talking about the American population. So basically, a third of the Americans have tattoos. If you are younger than 40% of the population have at least one tattoo. Of the whole American population, 10% of the people have a tattoo with a spiritual or religious meaning. If you think that people who go to church are about 8 to 12% in different parts, I mean, kind of the same number of people that go to church regularly have a religious or a spiritual tattoo. The most interesting thing, perhaps, is the one with the star there, that is most of the non-affiliated persons, and keep in mind we're talking about non-affiliation, not atheism or agnosticism, but people who believe in something but do not identify with the religion, are younger persons, which is the same population that have more tattoos. So, we'll talk later, but tattoos are one of the ways, and perhaps the only way, that not the only, the most important way in which non-affiliated people have to show their spiritual commitment, but they're not an affiliation at the same time with an institution. Like if you are a Catholic, you have a rosary, a cross, a necklace. If you are non-believer, the variety of things, the things that you can show are limited, and in that sense, tattoos became important in that sense, to notice that. Location in the body matters. Some tattoos are for oneself. Usually the tattoos in the forearms is something that you can see easily. There are tattoos that are for other people to see. Location may tell something about protection. For example, in Mexico, the Santa Muerte tattoos tend to be on the back for someone to protect you, to watch your back, that sense of the tattoo. And the location in the body also has to do with workforce. You know that work, the way in which we work, discipline our body. We dress up, we present ourselves regarding our workplaces. Women, for example, are very careful about the tattoos and what they will show according to the dresses if you are going to go for Wall Street for a business career, for example. And women are very conscious about that. When we did the research here at BC, women were negotiating their tattoos with the workforce. Basically, they have no problems negotiating with the families, they have no problems negotiating with their religious traditions, but they didn't want to mess with the market and corporate America. It's like, okay, like I want to get a job, I want to work in Wall Street, I want to go to law school, I'm not going to mess with that. So it was very interesting how the location of the body, in the body of the tattoo, matter. Size and time indicate also the money invested in the tattoo. There are tattoos from $50, a small tattoo, and there are tattoos like $20,000. And there are tattoo artists who have a waiting list of 2 or 3 years. And people who invest in tattoos as they invest in other art. And they are thinking about tattoos are a kind of work of art that they want to invest in. Many styles, tribal, American, Japanese, techniques, basically machine or hand poke. One thing to keep in mind is that the idea that we have today of a tattoo that you want to intervene in the design, you want to bring something, is new. Until the 1970s, you went to a tattoo parlor, you pick the design, you get that tattoo. There was no personalization, there was no investment of the person. Most of the tattoo artists at that point were tattooists. Today you have a lot of people who came from fine arts, and they are not making money as painters or designers, and they go to the tattoo business as a way to make a living. The guy that you saw before, Daniel, is a guy from Spain, from Malaga. He's a fine art person, and his tattoos are kind of like, obviously, like very baroque, very creative, but there is a craft there that is not your tattooist in Boston Seaport doing something where people were moving around. So what about religious tattoos? And this is one of the tattoos of Daniel, for example. You can see the craftsmanship there. We found that there are 8 types of religious tattoos. First, foundational, the tattoos that mark spiritual experiences, an intense experience that you want to, that shape the identity of the subject in a special way, and you want to keep it. This guy also get the first drawing of his firstborn on his arm. He said that people keep touching it because they think it's a pen thing, you know, like a pen drawing, so they keep touching, but it's a tattoo. We have the devotional tattoo, which is the second one. Daniel said, for me, the tattoo, which is inside your body, under your skin, represents your faith. It's much more than any other religious expression, because you have your own faith printed on your skin. And there is no way around of that. Like you can't pretend that you didn't go to Mass on Sunday because you're ashamed of going to Mass. Like, that's it. I mean, there's no way of disguising that. It's a religious tattoo. There is no discussion about that. It's a very Catholic tattoo, and it's Our Lady. I mean, there is no mistake around that kind of tattoo. We have the pilgrimage tattoo, the one in the hands, in the grease there. There are some places in the tradition, Holy Land, Loreto in Italy, nowadays in the Santiago de Compostela, this small tattoo that people would get when they went to pilgrimage sites. It was a small tattoo, very fast. Someone who was skilled enough working with leather or other things will do the tattoo. And the tattoo have two main functions. First, we are talking before Instagram. So how do you prove you went to Jerusalem? You come back, like, you show that you went with the tattoo. And second, you didn't come back the same. You have changed. And the body reflects a spiritual change in the tattoo. The other one is the non-affiliated tattoo. This is a tattoo that has some kind of religious connotation. You see the yin of yang. You see the old flash for the tattoo on the back with the cross there, the tattoo parlor showing the things. But these are the tattoos that people used to express spirituality in their own terms. We have two other kinds of tattoos. The first, the one on the top, I call them tattoos of resistance. Those are tattoos that sign the resistance to a painful or stigmatizing situation. So many women who have been abused are getting tattoos as counterpart of the abuse. Many women are replacing after a mastectomy, instead of getting a prosthesis, they are getting a tattoo, emphasizing the scare, like saying, okay, this happened, and not this is a beautification, but this like, okay, I acknowledge that this happened. And this tattoo connects with the first Christian tattoos that we have. The first tattoos that the Christians have were 30 or 40 years after the death of the crucifixion, and were Christians who were punished by the Roman Empire with a tattoo on their front, on the forefront, that said on their faces, Admetaria, so go to the mines as a slave, or slave of Caesar. The name for that inscription was stigmata, because there were no tattoo is a word that came after the trips of Captain Cook in the 1700s. So the Christians will go to Jerusalem for Holy Week at the same time that Jesus got his stigmata, and they will also ask for their own stigmata, because when the Roman Empire started to tattoo them, the Christians said, yes, but I'm not a slave of the Caesar, I'm a slave of Christ. And I got the stigmata because Jesus. So what was a mark of shame became a mark of honor. Similar situation with the grandchildren of the survivors of the Holocaust, who are getting the very same tattoos that the grandparents got, the number in the same part of the body. The other tattoo is a deceased tattoo. Soledad Garcia, she is the relative of two disappeared persons in Argentina, and she got these flowers on her left arm that is "Don't forget me." I don't know how you translate that, but the name of the flower in Spanish is "No me olvides." Don't forgive me.
Forget me not. Yeah, forget me not.
Forget me not. Okay. And it's a flower that they use on the graves in some places in Argentina, and she got these two flowers because of her two uncles who were disappeared. She's a performer artist, so while she was getting the tattoo, she was writing "Forget me not" on a notebook. But tattoos became important for many people who have losses, who want to honor the dead, in part because the tattoo may trigger a conversation that people don't want to have. So for mothers who have lost their children, some of them will have a tattoo in a kind of visible part of their bodies. So if people ask, okay, you allow me to talk to you about my kid, but if you know that I lost a kid, you wouldn't ask me. So it's a way to grieve, it's a strategy of grieving. So, at the end, are tattoos religious practices? Yes, and they have been around for a long time. I mentioned the tattoos on the Roman communities when the people were persecuted by the Romans. We have testimonies of the fathers of the church that are referencing scriptums or inscriptio in the bodies of people. The most notorious one perhaps is Procopius of Gaza in the 400s, who said that people will have a tattoo on their wrist, like the one that we see in the pilgrimage, following Prophet Isaiah, who said you get the name of the Lord on the top of your hand. And that was a kind of the biblical scripture that he used. In the Middle Ages, tattoos were common in the British Islands, in the Italian peninsula. Crusaders and pilgrims returning from Jerusalem will have tattoos. Some people say that even Muslims who were going to Mecca would have tattoos, would get tattoos in Mecca, in spite of the prohibition about tattooing. Tattooing was widespread in all Native American societies at the moment of the conquest of the Americas. Basically all the records that we have from different reports mention that Native Americans were having tattoos. If you have been following the New York Times science section, a couple of weeks ago they discovered a mummy in Peru in the 1200s with tattoos, her body covered with tattoos. Hernán Cortés saw that in Mexico there was a Franciscan fighting against the tattoos in Central America in the 1500s. Jesuit reports from the 1600s mention tattooing among all the places where they went. So basically everyone was saying people were getting tattoos. And it's interesting because some of the guys, it was a Redentorist in Canada, when he saw the tattoos, he said, looks like the pilgrimage tattoos that people get in Jerusalem, showing you how popular the Jerusalem tattoos were in France at the moment that he was in Canada reporting about the tattoos among Canadians or the Native Americans in Canada. In the Balkans, this old woman there is showing her tattoos. It's a tradition that started in the 1500s, as we can see keeps going today. The tattoos among sailors was something. People said that because they were bored, they have nothing to do. Many times when they were traveling, so soldiers and sailors will get the tattoos. Other people said that has to do with some devotion, and because the tattoos were about anchors and some texts that talk about hope. And other people said that the tattoos were on the back usually to avoid the flagging, because the punishment was like the flagging on your back. So if you have Our Lady of the crucifixion of Jesus, okay, you have to flag them, So it was a way to avoid the punishment or not get that hard punishment there. In the 19th and 20th century, we have many tattoos, many recitals about tattoos. This is a performance in a circus. She performed with her husband, and you can see on her back Leonardo da Vinci's Last Supper as part of the religious tattoo. The interesting thing for me is that even with this record of tattooing, sociology forgot about tattoos. The treatment of sociologists about tattoos were this is inmates, this is superstition, this is not real religion. Real religion is going to church. There were no religious tattoos in Europe. If you read many of the books, they will insist that tattooing in Europe was reintroduced by Captain Cook because the church has banned the tattoos. There were no banning. There was some recommendations, and the scripture, and then some text in the church were like, okay, you have used tattoos in these circumstances and not in these other ones. But in any case, from a sociological perspective, the important thing is that the people were getting the tattoos. Even if banned, they were getting tattoos. So, I guess my point is that tattoos are a legitimate religious practice, and that I want to make the case that perhaps if we stop looking at religion where we think religion should be, and we start to look at religion where religion is, we can find that there is more religion than we assume. Thank you very much. Yes.
Let me start off with questions. So
Yes.
I know transcultural analysis is a very difficult and tricky thing. So your study, your 3-year study of tattoos as part of the religion in Latin America. But Captain Cook, when he discovered the South Sea Islanders, there's all these descriptions that many of the islanders he encountered, and he was the first European to encounter them, they had tattoos from the top of their head down to there. Do you think that the same kind of religious impulses in a non-Western, non-Christian society would obtain? I mean, I guess I'm asking, what are the levels of meaning of this?
Yeah, I couldn't find, Mark, like the for the New Zealanders tattoos if there were any religious implication there, because I went to New Zealanders before Cook arrival, they will have a tradition that was when two tribes fought each other, they will kill the defeated one, but preserve the smoked heads of the leaders in their power. The heads will have tattoos and they will trade those heads in the future. So I beat you now, I chop your head. If your descendants come 10 years later, I can trade the heads for peace. Which was kind of better than just obliterating the whole. But so the point was that when the British arrived, they started to trade guns, and the killing escalated. And the Westerners started to collect heads of the tattoos. So there was one of the first documents, a European document from the tattoos that we have is Mayor Robley, who was collecting tattoo heads. 1905, he decided to sell the tattoo heads. New Zealand said, we are not going to buy that. The American Museum of Natural History in New York bought the heads. They got the heads, and I guess a couple of years later they didn't know what to do with the heads, so they returned the heads to New Zealand. But they kept the record of this person, and he doesn't mention anything about religion on the head of on the tattoos. He described the tattoos, but there is no hint of any religious idea there. I wonder if that has to do with him as a member of the British Army describing other things, or with the religious practice there. We do know that in Egypt, 2,000 years before Christ, we have the first religious tattoos that were on the belly of dancers from two gods, the gods of fertility and the gods of a goddess of love. And those were religious tattoos, and it seemed that were linked to a sanctuary. Some people say that was also common in Babylon, so for that reason, the prohibition of Leviticus, you will not get tattoos. Because both in Egypt and in Babylon they were getting tattoos, so that was a way of differentiating that.
Questions?
So you mentioned a little bit about how in sociology, nothing, like everything has a meaning. But I can recognize that some of my friends, I might ask them about a tattoo, and they're like, oh, well, I got this tattoo of a waffle because it's funny. Or like, I got this other tattoo because I thought it looked cool. So how do you reconcile something looking cool or something being funny with religious experiences?
I would say that there are tattoos that are religious, that are these 8 that I mentioned at the end, but I would say that every tattoo is telling you something. So why a waffle and not bacon? Like, for example, or you know, like, okay, why this breakfast and not another breakfast? There's something there. And the coolness has to do with aesthetics, Owen. And in sociology, we do believe that the aesthetic taste is something that is constructed. For that reason, we can say, okay, this is a lower class, cheap design, and this is more expensive. Or this is fine art and this is not. Because that idea that this is cool and this is uncool is something that we build together. So perhaps your friend's tattoo do not tell us anything about the religiosity, but they are telling us something about social class, about aesthetics, about the investment in their tattoos. You know. Yes.
Hey, thanks so much. Very interesting, Gustavo. I was interested in hearing a little more about the tattoos of resistance. So it's extraordinarily powerful to, recall Holocaust, generate future generations of Holocaust victims and/or survivors who replace the mark on their arms, and that's extremely powerful. But I also wonder about about whether the placement of these resistance tattoos is relevant. So I'm looking at, like, on your chart up there, you had the Pew Forum saying, and it said, for example, that LGBTQ people would have more tattoos at twice the rate of cis folks, or straight folks, or other categories. And I wonder, like, is that a sign of resistance as well to culture, to and like the other forms of resistance around, like whether it's politics or power, you see political tattoos. Are they placed in more or less visible ways? Or are they like? Can you say a little bit more about the resistance part? Like, I'm intrigued by that because there's so many things.
So
to
I
resist.
found the resistant tattoos among the survivors of the Holocaust. There are some publications about that. What is interesting there is that the generation that was the victim, they were covering the tattoos. They have the tattoos, you could see them, but they were not talking about the tattoos. The second generation didn't ask about the tattoos because it was a topic that nobody talked at home. The third generation is the one that went back and asked what happened, and they are replicating the tattoo in the same place. I think that's a way of memory. It's like, this happened. It's like facing negationism in Europe. It's like, no, this happened. That was the number. But at the same time, I'm a survivor. We beat you. We are here.
Right.
You know?
Isn't that Anson's law says what the son wishes to forget, the grandson wishes to forget. But the second generation wants to forget the third generation.
Trafficking, victims of trafficking have tattoos also. And sometimes because the pimp tattoo the victim first. So there is a tattoo as property of joy or BB King tattoo. And that's a kind of network of trafficking. So the women will get another tattoo covering that. I did some research with the tattoos of the disappeared in Argentina. So 1970s, civil war, the government kidnapped people, disappear the bodies. You never recover the body of your deceased. People are getting the names. It's not only the image, but I want the names of my parents on my forearms to see. And it was like name them, you know, like that was something very powerful there. In terms of political tattoos, so one interesting thing, I did a research on the Argentinian national soccer team, the world champs, the tattoos, and there is basically no national tattoo. There is no Argentinian flag, there is no Malvinas, Falkland Islands, and you see the American athletes, they do have the American flag or some kind of national identity tattoo. So there is something about this generation of players that don't want to mingle with politics, which is important because Messi has a Jesus here, where Maradona have Che Guevara. So it's like in your face, like you see the picture that is like astonishing the difference there. So those are the ones that I for example, the women who were trade after the Armenian genocide, they were sold to Berbers in Syria. All those women got tattoos, Muslims and Berbers, to deny their Christian Armenian identity, and they didn't want to talk about the tattoos ever. Like, it has been very hard to recover that memory, and I haven't seen the case of grandchildren getting the tattoos of their grandparents. It was much more painful, I think, that to have that.
Gustavo, for the religious tattoos, or I guess it can be in general, like, did you see any patterns as to reasons as to why people got it on their shoulder versus their forearm versus other places, or was it just individualized?
Forearms is for you to see. So it's for someone else, but it's also for you. It's for the person. So perhaps the tattoos that you use for praying, like some scripture of prana, a cross, or something that you will see when you're praying, are here. There are tattoos for protection on the back. And then in some cases on your ill part of the body. Like, okay, I always get my left leg hurt.
Okay.
So I will get the tattoo on my left. Okay. So there was some kind of connection. It's not John like 90% or
right,
like that.
Right. But you saw it more than once.
Yeah. There is a connection there. Yes.
Thank you again, Gustavo. And when I've heard your research on this, I think I'm always struck with that point that you make about that people think that tattoos were like much more countercultural than they really are, that they're much more prevalent, I mean, in the past and even now today. I guess I'm like wondering if you could speak to that a little bit more. Why do you think that there was this element of feeling like it was only people in the margins who would get tattoos when rather it's actually much more common than you might think? And maybe even I was interested in what you were saying about that, especially for religious tattoos, it's a way to feel countercultural in a maybe more secularized society, that you're putting something on you that forces you to out yourself kind of as a religious person, or I was interested in what you were saying.
So there is a link of tattoo and criminality, but this started the other way around. So why do we swear raising one hand? Because the British Empire tattooed your hand if you were a felon. So you raise your hand to show that you have no tattoos, that this is my first time. Okay? The Japanese will tattoo the criminals on their bodies. The Russians and the Tsars and the Soviets, so all the Russians did the same thing, they tattoo the people. So criminals will get the Yakuza tattoo to cover the tattoo that the government has put on them first. So it's true, the association of tattoo and criminality, but the other way around. Because I read only one source, I couldn't check that, but Massachusetts used to tattoo its inmates on a bicep, Mass SP or PS penitentiary service, and a date that was the date of your release. So if the date is ahead of time, you're running away. So there was this punishment that has to do with tattoo, and then in the history of slavery, the branding of people that is connected to tattooing also. I think the 19th century, when Cook came back, he reintroduced tattoo to the elites. He brought a tattoo person from Tahiti and present him in the London elite. So the aristocracy started to get tattoos. So many of the kings of England will have tattoos. Alfonso XII and Juan Carlos I from Spain have tattoos. The Swedish and Danish king have tattoos. Lady whatever Churchill, the mother of wisdom, who was an American, got a tattoo on her arm in San Francisco. It was people were crazy about that, and it's the Orobator, no Orobator, that's a Jesuit. The snake beating its own tail, Ouroboros, which is a kind of Talmud symbol of eternity or something like that. So you have the extremes of the society, the top elite and the popular classes getting tattoos. The middle class were the ones who say no. I think the association has to do with that. Like, we are thinking about tattoos as the port, as Bower Street in New York, these marginal cities, people working class and getting the tattoos. But in the 20th century, we start to see religious tattoos as a way of jewelry. Like people will get tattoos to mark that thing. But the connection has to do with it was real. And the tattoos in sociology, the research on tattoos in sociology came from criminology. 19th century, we are talking about phrenology, that idea that your moral deviance has to do with your body. So we have to measure the body of the criminal to see if the shape of the head or something. So we have the catalog of the tattoos there. So the sociology went to those sources first to look for the tattoos. But I think the association has to do with that. Like it wasn't in the elites, among the elites. So people didn't get that.
Wow. Thank you.
Yes.
I would like to, if you could, maybe what I'm going to ask has no answer, but connecting that with what you say about sociology and the lack of religion, is there? Well, what you are saying is that so we are measuring religion in the wrong place. That's. What do you mean behind that is that there is always, despite the secularization theory, that there is always like a certain amount of religion that is present, you like it or not, I mean,
Yes.
in one way or another, that it will show up in one place or another, and
Yes.
but it's like a constant.
So we don't have measures, so we cannot say that it is constant or not. What my point is that I do think that today there is more religion than we measure, because we are only measuring church attendance, affiliation, and importance of religion in your life. Those are basically the things that we measure. But for example, another of the measures that is, did you read the Bible, or do you read the Bible? Among the Argentinian players, of the 20 persons that have tattoos, 16 have religious tattoos. Not a single one of them is a biblical quote, which is the opposite with the Celtics players. The Celtics that have tattoos have biblical quotations. It's a different tradition. You are measuring something that is not there. Like if you are looking for a biblical quotation, it's not in those other bodies, you know. So my point is that we need tools that are more open to capture the cultural diversity. So more than church attendance, I mean, just to push the argument, I say, okay, let's ask for tattoos, because they are in different cultures, they are in different religions, they have been there across the time. The Mass, as we think about the Mass, and theologians here, I'm afraid, but it's not the same thing, has never been the same thing. Like Mass have changed. I mean, it's not that the apostles will go, yes.
I'm reviewing a book by Christian Smith, who's a revered sociologist on the internet. It's called, the title of the book is called Why Religion is Obsolete. And his theory, which I think is a true theory, is that the amount of religion in the world at any given time is always the same, but where it manifests itself is simply different. So that, especially as you know, so lived religion, and now my classes read like Robert Orsi's Madonna on 115th Street. It's about Italian American immigrants who didn't go to church all that often, but who were extremely religious and extremely Catholic.
Yes.
And it was sort of like statues and candles in their bedrooms and things like that. So you're right, you can't just measure the amount of religion at any given time by just looking at church attendance and things like that. It's much more complicated.
I do agree with that part. Yeah. That's perhaps my comparison with the GDP. You know, like if you are looking one place in economy. Sorry.
Yeah, your reflections as a sociologist. I've belonged to a non-denominational group that visits federal prisoners here in Massachusetts. And compared to myself, growing up in Massachusetts, not seeing anybody with tattoos, of maybe the over 50 guys I've seen, at least half of them have tattoos all over, including the forehead.
Yes.
And the other aspect of visiting them is that many of them are interested in religion. And I keep thinking, is this a foxhole conversion? You know, I've run out of everything else.
Yeah. Yeah.
What are your thoughts on
I go to a state prison. I go to Norfolk every Sunday, and I see the same thing that you have seen about the tattoos. One thing of the inmates tattoo is that is the only thing that no one can take away from them.
Huh.
So, like as you know, guards can go to the cell and take everything at any moment. Sure. Things burn. In Norfolk, there was a fire. They lost everything. Tattoos are always with you. Many of them religious, many of them awful, like the ones that I saw, like the quality was terrible, it was terrible, and some of them incomplete, because they are going to finish them when they leave.
Huh. Is that intentional?
Yes.
Okay.
So it's like a date when they got in and a blank.
Huh.
And which says a lot about hope.
Yeah.
You know, like, okay, I'm going to finish the tattoo at some point, and I want to keep it open. In the Mass, tattoos, as you know, they are banned in prison. You cannot get a tattoo in prison.
Correct. Yeah.
So I was in the Mass, and one guy came with a tattoo, like said, "Falcon, that's a new tattoo." Yes. Do you like it? Yeah. I said, "How did you get it? Do you want me to tell you? No." But then he told me, like the toothbrush, the mechanical one, they put the needle, and they get the needle from the diabetic guy who will get a clean needle. And the dye is the dye for the hair, like the ink that they will use in the hair.
They get creative.
So it's
genius.
Wow. Thank you. That's good. That image is going to stick with me.
Every time I brush my teeth.
Yeah.
One last question.
How did you get into this?
Because of the research of the first project, this is 3 videos that we did with my brother. So that's the barcode for that. And my brother is a publicist, so they are quality videos. Not just me in a PowerPoint talking about that or whatsoever. So it's a kind of cool video. I saw the video, the photos, John, of the first group of people. Oh, sorry.
That's okay. You go back.
No. The first pictures of the research, and I started to go into that, and there were not enough literature about that. I mean, it was astonishing. Like you see, we have seen religious tattoos all over the place. Like at some point you saw that, and there's not a lot of literature about that. So I saw a niche, and when after that I'm finishing. Hope next year I'm going to sabbatical, and I hope during the sabbatical we'll finish a book on tattoos. So.
And you'll speak at every tattoo convention in the world.
Hopefully.
A Netflix deal.
Yeah, something like that. If you know someone.
Oh no, I don't. I'll ask for it.
Please join me in thanking Gustavo.
Thank you.